the first place winner of the Sketching Color and Light Proko Challenge, I'm going to click my little mouse and reveal it, is... Well, that didn't work. Hello, everybody. Marco Bucci here. It's my pleasure to be the judge of the Proko Challenge this month. I want to look at the believability of the light source, what causes your colors to occur. The only reason we see any color, or any value for that matter, is because the light's hitting it. I'll also be judging based on the sense of looseness or sketchiness to the piece. If you submit a finished rendering, I'll still look at it, but that's actually not going to help for this challenge. I want to see a reduction of shapes rather than the kitchen sink. It's so cool to see all these entries, by the way. Thank you guys for participating. This is a real thrill for me. This is a beautiful little picture. There's something like the mood of this really hits me. There's something that captures the innocence of childhood somehow. Like, I don't even know what it is that does it. Maybe it's the soft edges, but there's something about the visual language here that really appeals to me. But it would probably take me a few beats to say, oh, it's a high angle of a kid walking through the snow. The picture is comprised largely of soft edges. What you want to do, in my experience anyway, is find your focal point, include harder edges in that spot. The eye wants to look at that stuff because it's resolved for you. And the eye is lazy. The eye will take things that's already resolved before it does the work to resolve something, right? But I love the color movement in the snow. When I say color movement, like there's little turquoise notes, purple notes, more grayish notes of color. Award the first. The Undefinable Impromptu Mystery Diffuse Award. There's just something about it. It's undefinable. You win one of the impromptu awards. Hilarious, yet still based on realistic light award goes to Funny Bird. This piece makes me laugh. Just the pose of the bird is hilarious. Such a clear, simple, yet effective separation of light and shadow. Nice work, and that's hilarious. High degree of contrast between light and shadow really helps those shapes be identifiable. It's very easy to tell what's a light shape, what's a shadow shape. This area of pumpkin here, that's not a shadow. This is a shadow. This is a halftone. Watch out for what the color is doing in halftone. Because halftone is part of the light, not part of the shadow, a halftone in warm light like this will often be much warmer than the shadow. Right now, your halftone is, I think, too cold, too cool of a color to be affected by the warm light. That warm light needs to warm up that halftone. Same with the orange pumpkin. I like your values, but the halftones are too cold. And also, you have these blues here. I'm pretty sure you want that to be reflected light, but like this blue passage right there, you've painted that in the light. That needs to be in the shadow. The reflected light, ambient light is not strong enough to compete with direct light. So those blues, keep them in the shadow. You did a perfect job here. How these blues are showing up only in the shadow. That's great. That's what I'm talking about. Impromptu award number 3 is called Not the Most Fascinating Subject Matter, but Good Shapes Win the Day. Great work. You deserve that award. Impromptu award number 4 is entitled Take All That Detail and Shove It. And that award goes to this one. This is a very common thing that I really think it's useful to try. And that is massing the shadows essentially into one shape. Now, this artist has gone back in with some reflected light, like under the chin and jaw and right up into the temple there. There's some reflected light, which is very realistic, but the effect of just that big shadow shape is quite evident. And that's a great discipline to get into. I learned this from Morgan Weisling, who's a fantastic painter. I learned so much from his DVDs. He talks about just reducing things to one shape if you can. And oftentimes the shadows of a head, especially a head lit by a single light source like this, it's possible to reduce all the shadows just to one shape. And that's kind of the spirit that's going on here. Yes, there is some reflected light that's breaking up those shapes, but you can see how this artist is really thinking about that one overall shadow shape. And as a result, I think it gains a lot of three-dimensionality, and it's a nice thing to try for when you're sketching too, because you just have fewer shapes to deal with. One thing to watch out for when you are adding reflected light, it's a common thing to favor like the rim of things. Like you see how this reflected light is kind of the same thickness of line all the way up the head there. Be careful about doing that. It flattens out the form. I think this painting would be stronger if that reflected light were removed. Remember that the head is made of planes. It's very rare that you will ever have reflected light just affecting a narrow edge of the silhouette like it's doing here. That reflected light will be, it'll define the planes of the head Whereas here, it's kind of a little too thin and a little too linear throughout. So be careful about that. But this is a fantastic example of a reduction of shapes, achieving something quite believable. This one has a beautiful light effect because of its edge work. The color is quite simple. It's basically monochromatic. It's like a orangey, or maybe analogous. It's like yellow, orange, and red. There's a few blue notes in there too, but it's mostly an analogous palette. It's heavily based on like reds and yellows, right? What gives this painting sophistication is these beautiful soft edges in the shadow playing against some harder edges, like the silhouette of her head is like a harder edge. But look at the eye sockets and the eyes and the features. The mouth and nose are softer edged. The planes of the head are basically lit in soft ambient light, so they are also softer edged. Up against harder edges from the sunlight really gives this piece impact. Impromptu award number 5 is entitled I Ain't No Slave to Facial Features. I absolutely love the bravery it takes to soften the edges to that degree on a face that's that much in the focal point of a picture. The first time I ever saw that was Craig Mullins did it on some picture of a lady in, I think, a cornfield, and he just didn't render the face. But it still worked amazingly. And this is great. I love the direction you took with that. Creatively, it is not an obvious choice to do that. And on a light and color note, especially a light note, I think that softening facial features emphasizes, or what that drives you to do is emphasize just the form of the head and emphasize how the light is hitting just the major planes of the head. And you did a great job with that. So it's stuck in my mind, this painting, and you deserve that impromptu award. Congratulations. This pen sketch has such a strong light effect. I really, really think this is a good example of keeping your values and shadow similar, which in effect is also that same softness. I keep talking about being a little softer edged in shadow. A good way to do that, you don't always have to use literal soft edges. You can just keep your values in shadow very similar, and the effect will be softness. Easy passage for the eye between one value and the next. The shadow on her skin right there is not so different than the value of her dark bathing suit. You might think a dark bathing suit would be way darker than skin, but the artist has rendered it so the shadows are very similar in value, and that just, it masses the shadows together, makes them more the illusion of one shape, and it makes it so punchy and so easy to read. Very successful piece for that. I can see the perspective line of how her feet are related to the chair, related to the ground. Just showing where something contacts the ground is really useful. And that's not a lighting note, that's more of a perspective note, which again is not what this challenge is based on. But I also think that the fact that you're showing the same type of umbrella at various levels in space helps. It also helps from a lighting standpoint too, because we know it's the same object, and one of these objects is in shadow, the other one's in light. It's a good thing to do to have multiple versions of the same object throughout your scene and cast one of them in shadow, one of them in light. Maybe one of them has dappled light on it. It really, really helps with depth, because the brain knows what it's reading when it sees the same type of object through space and through different types of light, light or shadow. Impromptu award number 6 is called I entered a contest with the word color in it and I didn't use any color, and it goes to the pen sketch. The reason I chose this, I think the grouping of values is very strong. And this is a great look at how you can have something appear to be a simple shape, but when you kind of look harder, there's all these kind of little shapes within that. But the eye kind of registers it as one shape. And these shadows kind of qualify as that to me. They feel like one statement, even though there's more going on in them. So good work. This is really nice. The palette is interesting. It's a kind of an otherworldly palette. The shape design is solid. There's no real light on the figure. Like the whole figure is just cast in a sort of generic shadow. But because that cast shadow there in the background is so strongly done, and there's a bit of a sense of ambient light hitting the tops of the seats here, you just buy it as being illuminated by light, even though the figure, the focal point of the picture, doesn't really have any light. But it still feels like it does. It's just flat color. That's a pretty cool accomplishment. There's something there that you don't see often. So nice work. Impromptu award number 7 is called I don't know how you did this, but somehow you pulled it off. The restraint here is just beautiful. And also, I love how the brushwork just kind of looks like you scratched it in, but you still got a good shape out of it. I really respect this one. Great work. I love this painting. Nice job. Impromptu award number 9 is called I'm going to make you think I used bluish gray, but I didn't. Haha. And that award goes to this portrait. The bluish gray I'm talking about is the reflected light on the jaw, the reflected light on the neck. It looks bluish gray, does it not? But I brought it into Photoshop, and I just want to kind of prove a point. Because the palette is so warm, you want to have a bit of relief to that. You want to cool things off in parts. But I'm going to sample this color. And just in your head, before I do, think about where you might expect to see it on the picker, okay? Ready? 3, 2, 1. How many of you guessed that? That's one of the coolest things about color, no pun intended, is that you can have something that looks cool temperature, yet, where was it? There. That is not, almost objectively not a cool color. Color is not an objective thing, but that is pretty close to objectively not a cool temperature color. Yet it looks cool temperature in the painting. So great job. I love that when people can pull off that illusion. You deserve that impromptu award. Because the shapes are kept so simple, it almost feels like there's one shape of light and one shape of shadow. I know it's more complex than that, but that's kind of the effect of it. When you can do that, you can draw the viewer's attention to other things. When the viewer's not bogged down with all these little shapes, if you keep your shapes bigger, you can do things like get a nice glow to the piece and really have that feature in the final effect of the picture. Little individual hairs, that's a nice touch of smaller shapes up against the bigger shapes. If you keep your sketches only big shapes, then it'll be boring. But this artist has wisely chosen to go in with small shapes, like the little individual hairs, the brushwork and some of the shadows of the hair, creating little shapes to still give it that big, medium, small interest. You're doing that thing with the edge. I actually have a video about that where you have a different color along the edge between light and shadow. It really helps sell the bright light effect on skin in particular. You can do this on other things, not just flesh, but it really helps sell the human flesh aspect of light traveling through the skin and kind of just getting that little warmer glow before turning into shadow. It's nicely done here. And the final impromptu Proko Challenge Art Award is entitled, Screw It, I'm going to design the crap out of these colors. And it goes to this one. This is something that I think really works in just art in general, with sketches included, when you kind of have two local color areas. We've got a heavily red background, like with this billiard table, and then we've got a heavily blue foreground. Juanjo Guarnido used this a lot in one of his Black Sad books. There's like a jazz band on stage. It's a very complex scene. This is an effective technique. It's a very graphic technique. The color is completely off the map, not realistic at all, but doesn't matter. It's so interesting. And because you've given this world a temporary logic system, like the colors are cool up front and warm in the back, and you're not breaking that rule for anything, it works. And that's, again, the magic of color. You absolutely do not need to adhere to nature as long as you present the viewer with a logical system. It's kind of like world building in a fantasy novel. You can have characters do all sorts of magic. As long as it's consistent, the viewer will buy it. It looks like something I could experience in real life, even though I know lighting would never be this clean, except for maybe if you had a stage with exactly these lights, maybe you could pull this off in real life. I would up the level of resolution probably on his face, and then it would make more sense that everything else is sketchy. You kind of want to play the range from more rendered to less rendered to less and less and less. And now it's time for the top 3. Third place in the Sketching Light and Color Challenge goes to this one. Really, really enjoy the experimentation with moving that hue wheel around. If you look at the colors of the light, the shafts of sunlight, not a whole lot of exploration going on there, but to counterpoint that, you've got a lot of exploration going on in the shadow colors. Just the beautiful switches from purple to like turquoise or cyan, whatever color that is. That's a pretty good shift on the color wheel. You know, there's a couple of colors in between there. Like you got to pass through the whole ultramarine spectrum before you get to the cyans. So it's not a small shift, yet you're pulling it off here. I think you're able to pull it off because of your beautifully soft edges. But also, this is kind of a good textbook example of you manage to keep the shape. Like that purple hue there has a discernible shape. And it's a nicely designed shape too. It would pass my kindergarten principle. this is caricatured to be sure. Like nature wouldn't give you this much color, but nature will give you the impetus to use this much color. It's a caricature, right? You push what's there. And this is really successful in that note. When it comes to sketching light and color, nothing can encapsulate that phrase more than this. This is such a confident and good quality sketch of light and color. It doesn't look like a finished piece, but it doesn't have to. This could easily be a great roadmap or a great starting point for a beautifully rendered finished piece. I love how you kept the sunlight more uniform, yet even there you found little ways to play with it. The sun is like a little bit warmer yellow there, a little less there. The only part that doesn't work for me is the blues, like the blatant blues that you put in the sun. If you want to do that, just gray off the blue so it's closer to the warmer colors. But that doesn't matter. I absolutely love the spirit of exploration, of sketching, and of caricature in this piece. It feels like nature, yet it's somehow otherworldly, but it reminds me of living real life. Congratulations, you won third place. Okay, second place of the Sketching Light and Color Challenge is right here. This is a really good way of vignetting a piece. It's not just about adding like a gradient of dark around the picture. That would be the Instagram cheesy way to do it. This artist here has done it in a few ways. First of all, we got these columns. That can be a bit contrived. I think it works here though, because we have the columns. Obviously, it's a big circle of columns, right? So it works here. But what I really like is this central magical light source has a fall off to it. The light is strongest where it's hitting, the part of the circular dome, the circular structure here closest to the light. And then as it falls off, as the structure goes away to the left and away to the right, that light gets weaker. Therefore, the values get darker. And you have this beautiful, very natural, believable motivation for this vignette. And it really draws us in. And also beautiful reflected light on these cylinders that are closest to the light. So I love how like these cylinders up here in shadow, they're so rich and warm because that warm light is bouncing around. Then the cylinders here at the bottom, they're darker and cooler because there's less of that warm light. And the way you handled that gradation, that's very good. This is a solid picture. It's a masterful handling of these big cylindrical objects that are the same. It's kind of the same cylinder stacked up on top of each other, ever so slightly going towards the light. It's a beautiful transition. Maybe to the uninitiated, that might look easy. That's not easy to do. Also, you don't really even have the benefit, like it's just a cylinder. You don't even have the benefit of it being like a cool thing, like a mech robot or something. They're just cylinders, but it looks interesting. And that's one of the things that I love most about painting light and color is if you can get the light and color feeling believable, you can get mundane things to look interesting. I remember there was a time when I did a plein air painting of a garbage bag on the curb. And it was in my early days when I was just kind of figuring this stuff out. And the painting actually turned out pretty good. And I looked at it and I'm like, oh, wow, that was the first day I learned that you don't need an epic subject matter to be cool. Now, this is kind of epic in its mystery, but the cylinders aren't epic. But at the same time, and hey, that's another good accomplishment. You managed to make kind of simple things into this kind of glorious, mysterious world that I definitely want to know more about. I never mentioned all the cool, like, galactic formations in the sky there. I'm not sure if that's what you're trying to go for, but there's something about that makes me want to know more about this world. And on the like ancillary parts of the painting, the peripheral parts, maybe, I like how the light is falling off and just how you've treated things as they move away from the focal point. They get darker and darker, maybe a little bit less interesting. Honestly, the only thing I'd change is I'd take that wizard figure. He seems like a little just off to the side. I'd put him in the action more. When I say that, I mean like get him closer to the focal point. That's just something that I would do. You don't have to do that, but it looks like the figure is a bit placed as a bit of an afterthought. I'd get him in closer to the crux of the action there. Really good job on this. So congrats. You've won second place. And the first place winner of the Sketching Color and Light Proko Challenge, I'm going to click my little mouse and reveal it, is... Well, that didn't work. I missed it. I missed the button. This one. Look at that. That's just beautiful. Just a beautiful painting. Everything about it is handled extremely well. I can't really find anything I don't like about it, which is saying a lot because I find things I don't like about every painting. I think everything about this is done extremely well. It's a good lesson for, aspiring artists to look at this and look at the reduction of detail first and foremost, because detail is so alluring to us to want to paint it. There's nothing wrong with painting detail, by the way, just not what this contest is about. Challenge, I should say. When you eliminate detail, you can maximize the use of big shapes to communicate all kinds of character. When detail's there, the detail kind of replaces that. One is not better than the other. I can make my own objective judgment. I like this stuff better. Detail for me is like, there's a point where I'm just like, well, it just kind of looks photographic. And I'm like, I've seen photos before, but this, like a camera can't take that picture. This to me is something that is purely in the realm of a sketch, a painted sketch. This encapsulates it for me. Everything is just basic shapes. There's no eyes, but there is correct anatomy. There's correct shapes of the eye sockets. It's basically planar. I keep pulling this guy out, right? This is why I have this on my desk. Inevitably, we paint people so much, right, in our work. You really need to know the simplification of the head in order to pull something like this off. I also like how this artist has kind of simulated hair on the horse just with some directional brush strokes showing the direction of growth of the hair. That's really nice. Versus the people, like the skin is more flat, right? I don't mean it looks flat. I mean the brushstroke is just like a flat, planarly brushstroke, like sculptural brushstroke. Whereas the hair has more of a corrugated, like almost like a rake style of brush to it, which gives you the effect of texture. Beautiful distribution of light and shadow too, which is actually another point that I haven't made yet, but I might as well make it here. When you're designing light and shadow, try and never use a 50-50 distribution, half light, half shadow. Try and just skew it one way or the other, 60% light, 40% shadow, 70% shadow, 40% light. Like if you look at the main dude here, he's mostly shadow. There's some light, but most of him is shadow. That is a design choice that just tends to work better than 50-50. And I love how you're using kind of like the edge of the brush to simulate soft edges. Like there's not really any like airbrushed soft edges in here. It's all done with like just broken lines and broken charcoal style brushes. Like that edge right there is the sleeve, the fabric wraps. It's done with like just looks like part of the brush you're using, but used in a very economic and clever way to get a soft edge with like a single brush stroke. Really nice work. Great handling of shape, great design of shapes, great color and values, light side, shadow side, keeping those values separate, simple yet effective color temperature changes. How the kind of the white sash is warm in the light, subtly cooler in the shadow. Just adherence to the basic fundamentals, the building blocks of light and color is why I inevitably had to choose this one as my first prize. Congratulations to everyone. This was such a fun challenge to be the judge of. I hope Proko can have me back sometime. This was a lot of fun. It's humbling and honoring for me that you guys would participate in a contest that I was judging. Check out Proko's site. It's so awesome for all kinds of content. You can find my courses at proko.com/Marco Bucci. If you want to visit me, I'm on YouTube as well. Marco Bucci is my channel, and I'll see you on the Proko forums as well. Thanks for watching, everyone. There were so many more quality submissions that I reacted to. In fact, if you want to see an extended cut of this video, head on over to proko.com and you'll find a version there that's over 2 hours long. All right, so I'll see you there.